All right, y'all. This is the lecture for day 3, Civil War. So yeah, the election of 1860 is really what starts the war, or at least starts secession. So, here we have Lincoln. So this is Lincoln, and this is Douglas. Before the election of 1860, Lincoln is going to run against Douglas in a Senate, and he is going to lose. So just in the year before, Lincoln lost against Douglas, and now he's running for the presidency and he's going to win. So why is Lincoln going to lose a Senate seat and then go on to win the presidency? So the Republicans pick Lincoln as their candidate because he became famous because of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And Stephen Douglas is kind of notorious for the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So why is Lincoln going to win? Well, one is because the Democrats are split. They are fighting each other. So this is the Southern Democrat and the Northern Democrat. So the Democrats are split, and the fire eaters and the Northerners are supporting Douglas, who wants popular sovereignty. And whenever there is a split in the party, or like a divide, the other party is going to win. So, or at least it gives it advantage. So in the election of 1860, the Northerners and Southerners are tearing up the map. And yeah, so we have a very divided nation in the election of 1860. We have the, get this going. We have the South, who is essentially having their own election between Breckinridge and Bell. And Lincoln is going to win without a single vote in the South. So down here, the two candidates are really Breckinridge and Bell. Bell is from the northern part of the South, and he is going to take these states because he's basically a moderate. And Breckinridge is that fire eater, and he is from the deep South. So Lincoln is going to win all of these states. Douglas only wins one, and he is, right, he doesn't even appear on the ballot in the South. There's two reasons, essentially, the South are going to leave. Some southern states are going to leave immediately after Lincoln is elected, and one of them is because they hate Lincoln. He has been a personal, abolitionist in a lot of these debates, and they can kind of feel like he's going to go in and abolish slavery. But the other thing is politically, they are losing power. Obviously, if a president can win without having one state in the South, it is not good for them. And so South Carolina is going to be the first state to go. They are going to leave, and then other states are going to go. I think the second one is, Mississippi, then Alabama, then, I think Georgia's in there, fourth. Anyway, these guys are all gonna, oh wait, Arkansas doesn't go, sorry. All these states are gonna go down. So almost immediately, these states are going to leave the Union after his election. And I think this is significant because they're leaving before he even takes office, and they are taking over federal possessions. They are doing all these things, and the president is doing nothing to stop them. So when Lincoln takes office, he has to figure out, how he's going to try to keep the Union together or what is going to happen. And so, most famously in his inauguration, he says that, I am not here to get rid of slavery. And personally, he even writes in a letter to his friend that if he could save the Union without freeing any slaves, he would do it. And if he could do it by freeing all the slaves, he would do it. So when he first takes office, he basically says, I'm not here to end slavery. In the Battle of Fort Sumter, you could take a look at that video if you want. It'll be up on the slideshow. In the Battle of Fort Sumter, essentially in South Carolina, there's a federal fort that is surrounded, and it is surrounded by the Confederacy. So when Lincoln takes office, he has to make a decision. What am I going to do? Am I going to let the fort, go under, let the soldiers starve, or is he going to attack the South? And what he essentially does is he tries to resupply. And when he tries to resupply, the South is going to fire the first shots. And so Lincoln is kind of smart in that he doesn't start the war himself. He lets the South do it. But after the Battle of Fort Sumter, he calls up and he says, we need troops. And so then you're going to have states like Virginia. Virginia has to make a decision. Are they going to send troops to the north, or are they going to send troops to the south? And what they decide after Fort Sumter is they are going to join in the south. And so these states, Arkansas, Tennessee, Virginia, they are going to leave after Fort Sumter. It's important also to recognize that it's not all slave states. Some slave states stay. And so these are called the border states. So like Missouri, Kentucky, and Maryland have slavery, but they stay with the Union. So all throughout the war, Lincoln has to try to balance, right, what he's saying about slavery, because he doesn't want to lose these border states. So the war starts, and you have to think about the advantages and the disadvantages. I mean, it looks overwhelmingly on paper like the North has all the advantages, right? So the North has population. 71% of the population is in the North. 89% of the manufacturing, 71% of the railroads, industrial workers, horses, agriculture. I mean, you think of the South as being an agricultural place, but the only thing the South has is cotton, right? And the thing about cotton is you have to be able to sell it in order to get money. They don't even have food. They just have cotton. And then the North has, all of this. And the South has cotton. That's what they have. But the other thing the South has is they are defending their land. And the North is the one who has to win. It's very difficult to win a war. And it's very difficult to convince people. Like, essentially, Lincoln is going to go into this, and he is going to say, I am going to compel the South to get back into the Union. And the way he's going to have to do that is he's just going to have to do total war. So while he has all the advantages, the South just has to not lose. They don't have to win. The South just has to exist, and as long as they exist, they are winning. The North has to compel the South to get back into the Union. And it is a very difficult task. So the South also has really good generals. So that is their other advantage. So Lincoln is going to do a lot of things that are controversial. The other thing about the North that is a disadvantage is it's not a unified country. Many, many, many people do not want to go to this war, and many, many people especially are going to be mad when it becomes about slavery. So Lincoln is going to suspend habeas corpus. This allows him to basically arrest anybody who he thinks is going against the war effort. And so essentially, especially like in Maryland, where you have Southern sympathizers, he would just essentially, arrest people because he thought they were going against it. An example is John Merriman tried to impede troops, and he's arrested. So essentially, you would just get arrested because people think you are doing something wrong. New Orleans is going to be one of the first cities to fall. It is an early target. And the reason why it's an early target is because of the port. Why would the Union want the ports? Well, if you're not allowing the ships to leave, right? What is on those ships? Cotton, right? What is coming in? Money, right? And so one of the first things that the United States is called the Anaconda Plan. If you cut off, right, the cotton, they will have no money. It's just basically a huge embargo with, federal ships. And you have to think, the South does not have a navy. The United States does. The South does have some navy, but they have to build everything from scratch. So another advantage of the North is just that they have, a working government. They have a navy. They have an army. Everything is already existing. And the South has to build all of this from the beginning. So anyway, New Orleans is going to go down because the strategy is to basically embargo the South. The yeah, Butler is very, he's not very loved in New Orleans. So the New Orleans is under occupation. And there are stories of people, as the troops are marching down the French Quarter, people like emptying their chamber pots on them or making chamber pots with like Butler's face on it. The United States don't want to be insulted by New Orleanian women. Anyway, so these are the proper ways you actually, greet them. Anyway, you'll be held liable or treated for anyone. You can't show contempt for officers. So the Civil War is extraordinarily brutal. You can watch this if you want. But the Union strategy is compel the South to win. They're going to do this through the Anaconda Plan, which is basically, strangling people. Well, not strangling people, but, keeping food, keeping needed supplies to the South. You're going to have total war. They're going to try to chop the Confederacy up. They're going to try to cut it off. And so this is total war. Britain, it was thought, was going to support the South. And so the South really thought that because Great Britain needed their cotton, that they were going to support the South. But the British are actually just going to kind of stay out of it and wait it out and not support the South. They called this King Cotton diplomacy. They thought that the cotton would get them the British, but for the North, they did not. So the North really loses all of the early battles. The North does not do well. Robert E. Lee is scoring victory after victory. And finally, at Antietam, McClellan is going to find Lee's plans, and they are going to stop the Confederacy at Antietam Creek. Lincoln is going to get really mad because McClellan won this battle. If you looked at the numbers, it doesn't look like he won. It was a brutal, brutal battle. And McClellan is going to not pursue Lee. He is going to stop and try to help out all the people who are injured and died. And so Lincoln basically says, if I could just find a general that could fight, I could win this war. He's going to fire McClellan because he does not continue to take out Lee. But Antietam is a turning point because it's a win for the North, but also because Lincoln decides to do the Emancipation Proclamation after this. And also because of Antietam, they think that the British are not going to support it. So yeah, the Battle of Antietam is, if you look at the number, 87,000 Union troops died, 45,000 Confederates. If you look at that, you're not going to say that's a win. But it was a win, and the Confederates had less people, they had less population, and so this is more of a hit for the Confederacy than it was for the Union. But it is a brutal day. So after the Battle of Antietam, Lincoln said the slaves would be free in the seceding states in 1863. The war wasn't just to save the Union, it was also to free the slaves. It gives it a moral purpose, but in reality, it does not free any slaves. Politically, I don't know if it was even prudent for Lincoln to do this. It's going to make a lot of people upset. But he is going to do this. Another reason why the slaves are going to be used is that, as people were going through the South, they called slaves contraband. And so for a war effort, slaves could be used as soldiers with the Emancipation Proclamation. But before the Emancipation Proclamation, slaves were called contraband, which just mean since they were being used illegally, then the Union could use them. But some generals actually thought that the Constitution says that they have to return the slaves, so they returned the slaves. And so with the Emancipation Proclamation, it's going to allow Lincoln to give it a moral purpose, but also a kind of strategic purpose. The South sees this as, as a Southern view of emancipation, this is the devil, right? He's writing it with the devil's ink. This is the downfall of, society. He's standing on like the Bible, I think. I don't know. Anyway, the South does not like Lincoln. They see this as the end. And also they are like, this is what we knew he was going to do the whole time. He said he wasn't going to, do this, but this is what he was going to do. So, Frederick Douglass was a major reason why Lincoln does the Emancipation Proclamation. You could read any number of books, and Lincoln has any number of reasons why he did it. But Frederick Douglass is one of the reasons. And essentially, after the Emancipation Proclamation, free people of color are going to join the ranks in massive numbers. And this is, by the war's end, it's going to be 10% of the Union Army. Until 1864, Southerners refused to recognize black soldiers. So they are going to massacre a lot of people. They're not going to treat them the same as, white prisoners of war. And one of the most infamous is Fort Pillow. The 54th Regiment of Massachusetts. This is the one of the most famous. The movie Glory was based on this regiment. The officers are white, and the enlisted men are black. You could take a look at some of these videos if you'd like. It'll be on there. We're going to go over the New York City draft riots more in the next class. But many people are upset about the Emancipation Proclamation, and some of these people are Democrats in New York. And so in New York City, when, essentially Lincoln is like, signs the Emancipation Proclamation, he also does a draft. And Irish immigrants who are Democrats, basically, they do not want to be in that. They do not want to be drafted for this fight. So as the war goes on, the North is kind of slowly moving towards victory. And the Battle of Gettysburg is where, Lee basically decides that he is going to invade the North. He goes into Pennsylvania, and it's a weird decision that he makes because, before this, he had just been basically playing defense, which is a much easier and better strategy. Like make the North come to you. And one of the reasons why he decides in 1863 to invade the North is because he wants to break the will of the people. And I think it's important to think politically about the date 1863, because in 1863, this is before the election of 1864. The election of 1864 is coming up. And actually, McClellan is running against Lincoln. It's the general that he fired. So McClellan is running against Lincoln, and he's essentially saying, like, we need to make peace with the South. We just need to let it go. And the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863 is essentially the South trying to break the will of the North, to, elect McClellan, to, not stick with Lincoln. Because the South is suffering since, 1861 with economic hardship and, the constant, all of these other things. And essentially, he needs to end the war quicker. This is not going to go well for Lee, and the Battle of Gettysburg is a turning point towards the end of the war as the North starts to win. And so the Copperheads are opposed to Lincoln. They do not like the Emancipation Proclamation. They are going to attack him. George McClellan is a candidate. They call him a tyrant because he is, violating laws. It is not a foregone conclusion that Abraham Lincoln is going to win this election. If you imagine how many people were killed because of the war, tens of thousands, coming in every day with casualties. He is, violating the Constitution with suspending habeas corpus. Taxes are really high because we have to support the war effort. And McClellan is like, we should not elect this guy. So it's called the Copperhead movement. And a lot of people, this is a Republican perspective, that the Copperheads are attacking, Lady Liberty. And so anyway, in the election of 1864, Lincoln is going to win. And it is, if you notice, Louisiana is voting because they were brought in under like one of the first states to be reconstructed, because they're one of the first states to fall. But anyway, Lincoln is going to win, and one of the reasons why he wins is because the war is going better. Sherman is going to be on his march to the sea, burning down Atlanta. You are going to have a lot more wins, and as the United States is winning, they start to decide, we should stick with Lincoln. It's not a time to negotiate now. So this march to the sea, you can watch this video on the slideshow if you want. He's trying to reduce morale, and he successfully does it. So then we're going to get to the surrender at Appomattox in 1865, and that is the end of the Civil War. Lincoln is excited. He's finally happy. He decides to go to a comedy, and at the biggest laugh line of that comedy, he is going to be assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. This is his funeral procession. And, even though they surrendered at Appomattox, it's going to take a little bit longer for the South to actually dismantle. This is actually Jefferson Davis. It was said that he disguised himself as a woman and ran away. As they were considering going into fighting, continue fighting, but they are going to surrender. Anyway, yeah, a lot of people said Jefferson Davis wore a dress. I don't. This is something from Dr. Jones. Anyway, yeah, we're gonna go into immigration next. I gotta fix that slide, and yeah, what is the point? There are a lot of changes. So the South left and came back to a different nation. Lincoln is a Republican, and while the South is gone, he's going to do a lot of other things like railroads and economy. You could take a look at the crash course for more of those things. And yeah. All right. I will see you guys next time.